Good afternoon to attendees that can hear me. We will begin at 5 p.m., so please bear with us as we do some housekeeping here. Ms. Dahm, can you let me know if you can hear me, please?
Hi, Marianne, I can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, Ava.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I can hear you.
Okay,
So,
so you see that little globe at the bottom of your screen?
mhm,
Okay, all right. So that's the one we're going to turn on. You're going to turn on.
exactly. So we are live currently. We do have participants already.
Okay.
I'll just have you start making some announcements. I'll let you know when to make them as we get just a little bit closer so that we can get people there. One of the announcements, if you can remind them that they won't actually hear you until I move you over, which will be just before we begin the presentation. So, and
Until
after
you
the
turn on the feature.
right, and after the presentation, we will share the Spanish PowerPoint as well. We'll put that in a post and we will put it out on our website. And then in our next newsletter, I'll have a link to it as well.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just hold until we get closer to 5. I'm going to do a couple of other housekeeping things I need to do on my end, but thank you for being here.
Okay. You're welcome.
Good evening, Dr. Castro. What just happened? Oh, there we go.
Is my audio working?
Yep, it's working now.
Thank you.
And we are live, just so that you're aware, and we do have attendees on. So thanks for being here. I'm going to do a lot of housekeeping before we get started, and then I'll let you know when we're all good to go. Thanks.
Marianne, are you still there?
Hi there.
Hi. Will you be the one to let everyone know in English that they will see the globe and they will need to choose their English channel, or they won't be able to hear the presentation after the function is turned on?
I thought it was only if they want Spanish, then they'll need to.
No, everyone will need to choose their channel, because once the
Is
function
that
is
new?
on, no, it's always been no.
Okay. Then
Because
I will
if,
let them know that.
yeah, just let them know that they need to click on the globe and choose their English channel.
Okay. I will let
Mhm.
them know that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm good to see you. We'll get started in a few minutes. We're live. Okay.
Marianne, I just sent you an email with a note.
Okay, one moment. Good evening for those that are in attendance so far. Thank you for attending this evening. We are going to wait a few minutes. We'll get started a few minutes after 5 to ensure that we are able to put all of our attendees in the correct language area. So if everyone can please hold for just a few minutes, we'll start right about 5:02, 5:03. Thank you.
Estamos esperando que todos se unan a la reunión esta noche. Vamos a comenzar como a las 5:02 y luego vamos a instruirles en cómo poder elegir su canal de lenguaje.
Again, thank you for everyone who is here and logging on right now. We're going to start just a few minutes after 5, so please bear with us as we ensure that everybody is on prior to our starting the presentation. Thank you.
Si se acaba de unir a esta reunión, estamos esperando unos minutitos que se unan todos los demás. Va a comenzar esta reunión un poquito pasado de las 5. Gracias.
Have I just sent you a quick note back? Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for our family webinar on the School Closures Advisory Committee process this evening. We are going to take a few minutes to do some housekeeping items.
Buenas noches, gracias por unirse a esta reunión acerca del comité asesor para el cierre de las escuelas. Estamos encargándonos de unos asuntos en estos momentos. Vamos a comenzar en unos minutos.
We do have two what we're calling channels this evening, one in Spanish and one in English. So for those that would like Spanish or English, you'll click the globe that is down on the bottom, the interpretation globe, and you'll select either English or Spanish. Once we send our translator into that room, you'll be able to do that. So if you can go ahead and translate that out, and we'll make sure we get everyone where they need to go.
En unos Segundo, se va a encender la función para la interpretación y va a poder escuchar la presentación en su idioma español. Si puede, por favor, cuando encuentre el globo en su computadora o tableta, hacer clic en el globo, elegir su idioma español para entrar en el canal de español. Si tiene teléfono, haga clic en los tres puntitos en su pantalla y elija interpretación del lenguaje o language interpretation y presione el español.
Thank you. And again, if once we split out the two channels for those that would like English, you could just click on the globe at the bottom of your screen and choose English. If you're on a phone, you'll need to click on the three dots and select language interpretation and then choose English. So we're going to go ahead and send you on over to the translation area now. Is that all right?
Vamos a encender la función ya y como recuerdan, ya sea el globo o los tres puntitos y elijan su idioma.
Thank you. We'll do that now. Eva, I'm going to ask you to talk and make sure I can't hear you. All right, we're all set to go. Thank you so much. So again, thank you for everyone being here this evening. You are at the family closures, family webinar related to school closures advisory committee process. And if you are wanting to hear this in English, please select the globe at the bottom and select English. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to start sharing my screen. Dr. Castro, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
All right. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. And I will go ahead and turn this over to Dr. Castro.
Okay, well, welcome. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you again, just as Marianne said, for taking the time to join us this evening. We know that there's a lot of questions related to school closure. We're going to share everything that we know to date. I'm fortunate to be able to be co-presenting with Dr. Mirza, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. You'll be hearing from him in just a minute. But as always, whenever we convene, although we'll be doing all the talking and there won't be a lot of dialogue except for some of the questions that you'll be posting. Either way, whenever we gather together, we always keep our students at the center of the conversation. As I said before, we have a lot of answers, but we don't have all the answers. And then we ask that in the way that you pose your questions, know that we're working on this together. This is a process that none of us want to be going through. Our board doesn't want to be going through, and yet it's a reality. It's a reality that I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. And then in terms of the answers, we will get to as many as we can. We've added in time for Q&A. Our team will be answering the questions that are most appropriate with the slides that are in front of us. Sometimes we'll interrupt that because there may be something that somebody asked that would have been covered in the previous slide. But either way, by the time we get to the end of our time, we will answer every question that we can. And then Marianne will talk about where we go from here later on. So with that, we can move on to the next slide.
Well, you thought so. Hang on a second here. Why is it not moving? Let's try that. All right.
Okay. All right. So why school closures? Why are we here? There's a background document that we recommend that you read. We do not have time to go over today. But there's a report that's done every 2 years in Ventura County. It's called the State of the Region report. In that report, it documents all of the demographic shifts that have happened in our county, and to the degree possible, applies some of those demographic shifts by city, and then sometimes in some of the documents by district. But overall, the story is the same. Ventura County is going through and has been going through a tremendous declining enrollment. The rate of our declining enrollment has fluctuated between second and fourth in terms of the most steep rate of declining enrollment across the state. And what does that mean? So what that's meant over the last few years is we've lost about 300 students because we had bigger classes when there were more students, more families. I shouldn't say more families. Our population has been growing, but not the population of school-age students. So we had larger classes, but due to declining birth rates and the expense of living in this area, like housing costs, all of those things have basically created the perfect storm for families who live in this area and who can afford to live in this area are having fewer children. So bigger classes leaving the district, smaller classes enrolling in TK and K, and that's our problem. And if you want to also learn more about what this means for our district and what it will mean presently and for the future, in a recent board meeting, we had a demographer study this, and those results are also going to be used through our school closure committee process. Okay, next slide.
And that presentation is currently on our social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, if you want to see that demographer presentation that they did.
So as we transition to the slide, one of the transitions that we're dealing with is looking at that rate of declining enrollment, about 300 students per year. In terms of dollar amounts, we get different amount of funding per student. It's called in our local control funding formula, but in general, we like to use on average a $12,000 per student rate, which is at 300 students. That effectively is $3.6 million annual loss a year. We've lost about, again, at the height of our district and the height of the county, having lost 1,000 students. That is, in today's terms, that would be about $36 million. And then going forward, when we get into that data with the school closure committee, which Dr. Mirza will talk about, that committee will be confronted with the projections of future enrollments and birth rates. And what that looks like over the next 5 years is a loss of about another, in the next handful of years, about another 1,000 students, which again is a real challenge. So in terms of what else this committee will be tasked with, they will be reviewing the data that I've mentioned and a lot of other data as it relates to student achievement, facilities, et cetera. And Dr. Mirza will get into that. It is a Brown Act governed meeting. So they will be complying with all elements of the Brown Act and publishing agendas and conducting the meetings with public comments. And then ultimately, they are acting in this entire process as an advisory, in an advisory capacity to the board. And we'll come back to, at the very end of the presentation, what happens as they move through the process. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Mirza.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So the first meeting is expected to be held on March 19, 2026, which is coming real fast in a couple of weeks here. And so the first meeting would be more of an organizational meeting. We'll review the committee's responsibilities, go over the Brown Act and have them fill out Form 700s. We'll have a brief overview of all of our sites that shows maps, including boundaries, giving them the address of each site, grade span, number of students. Then really that committee will be setting up, selecting a chair and a vice chairperson at that meeting. And then really we would like to spend time on the proposed criteria and scoring methodology that we're utilizing CDE's guiding principles for school closures. And so we really want the committee to spend some time in looking at that scoring criteria, looking at each of the areas to kind of get an idea of how going forward that we would be looking at the data and analyzing it and synthesizing it for everyone to understand. And so
I'll just jump in there. Dr. Mirza used the term CDE. He's referencing the California Department of Education and their best practices model. That is one of the requests that staff had of the board, which is to make sure that we are using a school closure process that is aligned with best practices, and that is one of them. And to ensure that we are following that process in the way that other districts model districts have done that across the state. We're using School Services of California to help guide us through this process.
So meeting 2 would be held April 23rd, 2026, and this is what Dr. Castro was referring to earlier. We had a demographic study that was done for our district, looking at historic enrollment, current enrollment, district-wide, looking at inters and intra-district transfers across all school sites. And then they also included enrollment projections from 5, 10 to 15 years, looking at the demographic makeup of our schools, The demographic study also included new housing developments and what is our expected growth in enrollment with those new housing developments. This committee would be utilizing that report to take a look and see where our schools would fall or rank according to these projections. And at the end of every meeting, we would like to, hopefully, if we could gain some sort of consensus from this committee about where the schools would fall based on the information that's provided on that specific criteria. So looking at this criteria, they'd be looking at enrollment, they'd be looking at capacity, classroom usage capacity, and kind of ranking each school accordingly. Meeting 3 is looking at our facilities. So we would have our director of facilities and our director of a bond manager coming and presenting, essentially taking a look at each site, looking at all of the square footage and the acreage, taking a look at site inventory, looking at permanent classrooms and portable classrooms, looking at environmental factors at each site, such as earthquake fault lines or easements, and then looking at the square footage of each site and any historical investments that's been done with a previous bond measure at each site, then looking at our current bond measure to see how much money has been invested in each site accordingly. Also looking at each site and seeing if there's any unique aspects of these school sites to see if they can't easily be replicated, looking at age, condition, looking at our overall facilities master plan. Next.
And Dr. Mirza, before you get into the next slide, we have a few questions that are starting to be posted, so I'm going to address a couple of them now. There's a question about what is the criteria for the decision which schools are targeted to be closed. That's what we're reviewing right now. Each slide goes over what each of those criteria are, and Dr. Mirza will be referencing a rubric, and that rubric is essentially how those schools are tallied across a variety of factors. So what we're going through is that criteria. There was a question about, is it more beneficial for students to have smaller class sizes? In general, yeah, it is more beneficial for students to have smaller class sizes. Depends on the class. Like for example, you reach a point where when does a classroom not feel like a classroom, and then you also have specialized programs. But in general, even now, when classes become too small, we start to combo those classes in elementary school. When those classes get too small to be viable, like in a high school level, sometimes we stop offering that course because it isn't viable to be able to offer a class effectively that isn't that one, students don't want, or we don't have enough students to have, and then two, there's a programmatic aspect too, which is it's hard to run a band, let's say, with 6 or 7 kids unless it's an ensemble. Then there are a few questions about just some details about the processes specific to the committee. So there's a question about, well, when will the committee get the agenda packets? They'll get that packet as the agendas are posted. What time does the meeting start? Somebody can correct me, but I think the first meeting on March 19th is scheduled from 5:30 to 8:30. And
once I stop sharing, I can confirm that.
Yeah, so I think that's the start time last time I checked. The next question is, what criteria does VUSD to decide which schools close and stay open? Again, we're working through that. But this part is a little bit nuanced. The person followed up with, is it only a capacity or a total number of students, or it is also considering the school grade? It's actually all of the above, and that's one of the challenges of this process. The committee is going to be dedicated and to have to hold all of these ideas in place. And just to give you an easier like paradox, which is in some cases you would think when we're using the classroom use reports that when you have a larger school that has a lot of available sites, you would say, that's easy, right? Close that school because it's underutilized from a classroom use report. But then when you think about, well, but a larger school with more classrooms means that that's a school that could potentially absorb a smaller class, or excuse me, a smaller school if that were to close, which is one level of analysis. But then as Dr. Mirza goes through these criteria, you'll start to hear about that there are many other factors beyond even just classroom use that have to be considered. And so I don't want to steal his thunder, but be looking for some of those criteria as he goes through. The next question is about transparency. Everything that is public will be made public. And so Marianne later on will talk about the website that we're maintaining because we feel that transparency is a best practice. So anything that's public will be available for the public. And then I'm going to pause here because the next question is who makes up the committee. So Dr. Mears, if you can talk about the committee composition.
Yeah, so the committee comprises of 23 committee members, including both union presidents, our VESPA and VUA union presidents. You have one person that is out of the area, and so we have 4 members from each trustee area, and so it makes up a wide variety of individuals. You have homeowners, you have classified employees, certificated employees, you have people with specialized skill sets or expertise, residents of Ventura, you have business owners. So it's a wide variety of representation across all of our campuses. So, and the board approved the committee on January 27th, 2026. That list is posted on our website, and anyone could download it and look at the committee members. And it also includes students as well. Sorry.
Yep. All right, thank you. And then there were just one more question and then a comment. The comment is, Marianne, I'm not sure what we can do about this. One of the individuals says they can't see the slides, they can only see us. Not sure how that would be the case, but if there's anything that you're aware of to advise that person.
I'm looking at layout and it actually should be the opposite. So let me look at that.
Okay. And then while Marianne is looking at that, the question is, if a school is closed, the classes are going to have more students. Will the teachers receive more money if they have more students? Great question. This is kind of a layered question, so I'm going to address it in a compartmentalized. Class size is dictated by the current contract, our current collective bargaining agreement. So that's one piece of it. One part of that agreement is that teachers are already compensated when, for any period of time, the number of students in that particular class in that ratio exceeds that, they do get compensated for that. But the one question that pertains to this that loops back to the previous question, which is regardless of whether it's at one school, at 2 schools, or we collapse, consolidate a school or close a school, we still have to abide by that contract. And so that's something that we will honor. Okay, so I'm going to pause on the questions, and there are some more, but we'll get to these as we go forward because it's important to have more information.
So the following meeting number 4, would take place June 18, 2026, and this focuses on educational and student support services. And so this committee would be looking at a criteria based on educational status, specifications, class loads, student-teacher ratios, looking at academic achievement at each individual site, looking at the California dashboard on each individual site, looking at program course offerings at each school site, looking at specialized programs at each school site as well, like unique offerings such as band, dual immersion, and looking at opportunities and different challenges and alternate programs at each school site. And so it is a lot of data that this committee would be looking at. And so we're going to try to break up all of this data into different criteria per se. So that way they would have the ability to digest and kind of analyze the information based on the data that we're looking at and rank the schools accordingly.
Thank you. And Amy, if you could please try to log on separately. I don't know if you have a second device. So this is asking a lot of you to see if you can see the presentation, because I can and it should be showing, but I'm not sure. So can't check it on another device at the moment.
Yes, I'm currently trying on my other phone. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And then meeting 5 would be July 16, 2026. And this is all the fiscal and other impacts. So we'd be looking at our district annual budget, multi-year projections. We'd look at current cost by each school site, looking at not only personnel costs, but operational costs broken down by individual school sites, looking at transportation, looking at how far, each school is from each other, looking at the routes to school, the walkability, how many of our students or families, walk versus drive, looking at traffic and safety measures across each campus, and then looking at like possible consequences of what would happen to a community or neighborhood if a school were to close.
Okay, and before we start the next slide, I'm just going to go through a few of these questions. The next question is, when a school is closed, what happens with the teachers? Will they be laid off or will they be reassigned to other school? Just like when we have all of our schools now, we staff to enrollments. And so wherever the students go, the teachers go. And when we don't have enrollments for any particular reason, just like happens on an annual basis, we do reduce teaching staff to the enrollment, and that happens at an elementary, middle, and high school level. There's a question about our application still being accepted in case a replacement is needed. The answer is no, but I'll ask Dr. Mirza to talk about the replacement process that's already embedded.
Yeah, we have 5 current alternates right now. And so, I mean, there's no openings as of right now that everyone's already board approved. But throughout this process, if, people fall out or decide that they no longer want to continue, after speaking with them and encouraging them to stay on, if we need to add additional members, we would refly applications to try to get at least the amount of committee members that we have currently. Like
Okay.
at least an equal distribution. So currently, like I said, there's about 4 representatives in each trustee area. And the alternates are 1 from each trustee area as well.
All right, I'm going to answer 2 more questions because they're the same question. One is in English and one is in Spanish. The questions are essentially, what happens to specialized programs? One of the things that the committee will consider is, are there specialized programs that, if a school were to be closed, can still be delivered in another setting using additional facilities? And that when we talk about specialized programs, that ranges all the way from dual immersion programs to special education programs, to CTE programs. So all of those things need to be considered at the same time. And there are a couple of other questions that are bigger picture questions. I'll hold off on answering those until we finish the next couple slides.
I would just like to add, Dr. Casa, what you said, looking at special programs, see if they could be absorbed. That the district, the committee would be looking at, the excess capacity at each site. And so that would that is a data point that they would be looking at, is the unique offerings that each school site has. Also, along with that, they would be looking at the excess capacity at each site. Right. And so meeting 7, if everything goes as planned and the committee doesn't need any additional information and doesn't require any additional meetings, this would be like a draft review report. So the committee would meet to look at the draft report or start drafting the report, seeking input from their fellow committee members, and really trying to start to synthesize and format the report that would be presented to the board and finalize all recommendations. The following meeting, we put there could be a meeting 8 or possibly even longer if the work is needed to continue. So if there's additional documentation requested or additional clarification, or the committee feels that they need, additional meetings to synthesize the data, then there could be additional meetings.
Okay, I think this one is mine. As Dr. Mears had just stated, these are projections, right? This is the schedule that's been posted just to be able to give the committee members an idea of what their time commitment was over the next several months. So this projection is that the committee, unless for some reason they were to need more time, we would project that they would make their recommendation, and that recommendation comes in a formal manner. There's a report that's generated, that would happen no sooner than October 13th. But like stated, it is still to be determined because this is such an important process that it is important that if more time is needed, then more time should be taken. So let's play that out. However, let's assume that the committee is on track with this timeline. They submit the report to the board for its consideration in October of 2026. Then the community could expect the board to deliberate on that in its board meetings in November, possibly December. And let's assume that and this is an if a school were identified to be closed or multiple schools were identified to be closed in that time frame, we'll talk in a couple slides about what happens next. What's important is that there's a due diligence that you can see and hear, hopefully, that goes into all of this criteria for which schools are meeting these criteria to be closed and from a ranking perspective. However, you need to consider also that the board, because the advisory committee is just that, it sits in an advisory capacity to the board. The board has ultimate say to determine if any schools will be closed, if 1, 2, or 3 schools would be closed, or more. But even if a school is closed, the remainder of that school year, the 26-27 school year, would be dedicated to the process of making sure that all the affected individuals, students, families, staff members, and then all the support staff that it takes to reorient our processes, we would be using the rest of that 26-27 school year to make sure that by the 27-28 school year, those new schools with the new processes, with new students and potentially new staff, which I'll get into in a moment, that everybody's ready to go.
So up next are opportunities for community feedback. And just like tonight, we will have opportunities for our community to provide us with concerns, ask questions. As Dr. Castro had stated earlier, the committee will follow the Brown Act, which does allow for public comment at each meeting. That public comment will be limited in time, given the fact that the committee does have work that they need to do, but there will be an opportunity for that. You'll also be able to look at our website that you can see here on the screen and review updated FAQs when we get new questions. Tonight, we're taking all of your questions and looking to see if we need to add to our FAQs that are currently there. So we'll continuously update that. And at presentations like this, as we're talking, we're taking notes, we will share all of that with the committee and the board as well. So there will be opportunity for that feedback as we move forward.
Okay, and before I go through this is we've already covered 2/3 of this slide, but before I cover the last portion, I do want to get into some of these questions that have been posted. So the next question it's a broad question. It's about, as we go through the school closure process, how are we taking care of our people? The question is specifically about teachers, but I'm going to broaden it. How are we taking care of our teachers? But we have a lot more staff than teachers. We have classified staff and a variety of certificated staff as well. One of the things that I've stated before, but I'll restate in case some people have just joined, we have a collective bargaining agreement with both of our unions, our associations. We have to honor that. And so a part of this question talks about class size. class size is dictated um, by that contract. And so whether it's at a current school or a school that has been closed and consolidated, we have to honor that contract. And so we will continue to do that. Um, the rest of the question gets into talking about how challenging school is, and that's true. The challenges that schools have inherited, especially since COVID, have been many. That's not the purpose of tonight's meeting. But when I talk about the transition, hopefully I'll be able to touch on that a little bit. The next question is about the ranking and how committees will assess a score. But the real question here is, can students, parents, or anyone do anything to improve the score or save the school? Dr. Mirza, I'm going to ask you to talk about the score in just a moment, but I want to talk about the saving the school process. This is if a school is closed, or even if it isn't closed, right? Just these conversations, just the fact that we are going through, looking at our schools and applying a criteria, the level of anticipation and worry that comes with that is going to have, it's already having an effect on us. It's going to have an effect whether or not your school is closed. So in terms of that concept of saving a school, what the best thing to do is to be active in this process, which is why this is a public process. You would be vocal in terms of we'll talk later on about reaching out to the board. We have their emails there, but also being active in the committee process. And that's the other reason that this process plays out over so many months, because we know there are certain things that really command our time during certain times of the year. And you may not be able to be at every meeting or every other meeting, but if you can participate in even one meeting and ensure that your voice is heard, that is a really critical part of this process. And so I'll pause there and ask Dr. Mirza to talk about the scoring process.
Yeah, I mean, to answer that question, it says, can schools, parents, students do anything to improve their score and save their school to improve their score? No, not necessarily, because this is based on data, right? So one criteria, like we mentioned, looks at enrollment. Another one would look at enrollment plus permanent capacity, classroom capacity, and then another criteria would look at unduplicated count per each school site. So those are data points that are what they are at a certain point in time. And we're looking at census day data. And so that's like October 31st. And so, I mean, so yeah, there's nothing anyone could do to improve their school. Like if we're talking about intra and inter-district transfers at census day, at each school site, meaning, I mean, there's nothing you could do about it. Those are the students that were there that decided to go to a school outside their boundary or within their boundary, or the students that we got from outside of the district coming into our district at each prospective school. When you're looking at facilities, you're looking at like our facilities, long range facilities master plan, and taking a look at, okay, at the time we did the long range facilities master plan at each site, what were the needs? What was the estimated cost that were needed to get the facilities back in working order? And then you look at our current project, our bond project, and looking at how much we've already spent on particular sites, and then any historical investments that we've already made. And so those are all data points that have already been done. And so we're looking at, yeah, so there's no really way to improve your score.
Thank you. Marianne, were you going to add anything there?
Just that what unduplicated is, because many will, this is a family, but also we're looking at how many take the bus, how many walk to school, how many drive to school. So those are there are so many touch points of data throughout this whole process that it looks at every aspect of every school to really make a determination here.
And
but
just because one area is higher or lower in rank doesn't make or break the whole situation, right? They have to take a look at each and individual criteria and take a look at the whole picture. So just because you rank low in one area and high in another area, like it's just ranking. You get a rank based on the criteria that we're looking at, and that gives the committee members information. it's an information point. And so the next criteria is another information point. And then at the end, they would have to synthesize all of that data to try to make some recommendations to the board.
Okay, and in terms of unduplicated, I don't know if we've used that earlier. If we did, we missed it. So an unduplicated students, that is our low-income foster youth or English learner. That's how the state defines unduplicated pupil. And so that's actually part of our funding formula too. They're referred to as our UPP counts, our unduplicated pupil percentage, and that also influences how schools are funded. Thank you for reminding us to address that, Marianne. Can you go back to the last slide because I just have to address that transition. In a moment, Marianne will get into the shaping our schools process in a little bit more detail, but I want to weave together some of the questions that had been asked that are specific like to staff. So I want to answer those questions from a like staff and contractual process, and then use that to move into what does that actually look like for schools that are closed and schools that are receiving schools. So I'll start with what happens to the employees? That's a question that's been asked in a couple different ways. That's actually part of the reason that the board wanted us to engage in this process, because when when schools are underutilized, they're expensive to run. And so one of the there isn't a clear breakdown in terms of how much is saved by closing a school, because it depends on all the factors that we talked about, right? But in general, working with other superintendents from across the state who have closed smaller elementary schools, and when I say that, I'm going to use a number that's between like 250 and 300 students. The projected savings can be around $1 million. And that leads to the question of, well, then what happens to those employees? As I said before, we staff to students and to enrollments. So when you have students, if you have 25 students in the classroom that need a teacher and need all the related service supports, like if you have a student with a disability and they require all the supports travel with them. But there will be staff that can be consolidated because you don't need to run that school anymore. So that would be like your principal, your office manager, some custodial, some health tech, and all of those positions that have already been filled at another school and don't have to contractually be increased per any pre-established ratio. So that's where that savings occurs. So it's could be around $1 million of savings for an elementary school, more for a middle school for the same reasons, and then ultimately the most for the high school. There was a question asked earlier, so are we only talking about closing elementary schools? And the answer is no. With two exceptions, and we're any committee members who are on this call, you're going to hear this during our first meeting. With two exceptions, Buena and Ventura High School, all other schools are going through this process. And one of the reasons that Buena and Ventura are not being considered for school closure relates to some earlier discussions that the board has been having. They've been very, very conscientious about wanting to ensure that we are maximizing our bond dollars. And out of that discussion, even though it's before the school closure committee, it was really clear looking at the demographics and classroom use and then all the specialized programs, there is no way to move a school the size of Ventura or Buena to any other campus in the district. So that's not just the students, that's all of the things that high school students need. That is impossible. So the committee will hear that formally on the 19th, but that is the talking points that we've said on a couple of public events. All right, so one of the other questions talks about evaluating other types of programs, and we'll just call those like specialized schools. So Hassan, that is one of the elements that you've already covered. Can you kind of just spend a little bit more time in detail on that, like alternatives to school closure?
Is that what the question is? Alternatives? Yeah, so that would be a topic that there would be additional considerations that the committee would be looking at, okay, what can we do with alternate uses of the school sites, or like is that the question that I'm reading? I'm not.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So there's one piece in here that's a challenge for us to answer, and it's charter schools. We don't. This process is not designed for us to address charter schools. However, our district magnet schools and different school types like Homestead, yes, that is those are considered to be like alternative programs, and where those alternative programs could be housed, absolutely, that is up for discussion. Dr.
Yeah,
Mears, anything you
like Pacific would be a good example of that. So yeah, that's still under consideration. So the committee would be looking at all of those areas: El Camino, Pacific, Homestead. Those would all be part of the process.
Yeah, thank you. Uh, I feel like I've answered this question, but because it's kind of personalized, the individual is asking like their child, their son, if they have to change high schools, do they get the same opportunities? Uh, by and large, the answer, without knowing all the particulars, the answer is yes, because that's part of what the school closure committee has to consider. That if there are specialized programs, can those specialized programs still be offered at another site? The reason that I can't just say unequivocally yes is that as it is now, we have many specialized programs, including CTE pathways, that when those specialized programs themselves start to become under-enrolled, at some point we have to make a decision about whether that course is viable and whether it continued to be offered, because there just isn't the number of students that make that a viable class. So I wanted to make sure that I said that. Marianne?
And when you say CTE pathways, what he's talking about are things like in middle school, our woodshop programs, or in high school, our photography, culinary, EMT type of programs. So that's what a CTE pathway is.
Thank you very much. Career technical education. My apologies. Again, that's two. That's two. We're doing well though, outside of that. Okay. Okay, the next question is, do special needs students classes, are they going to have more students per classroom? The answer is no. We will be staffing as we currently staff. So the special needs classrooms are affected by the types of students and their specialized needs and the types of classrooms and their specialized needs. The school closure process isn't going to change that approach. And I think I've addressed this other one about special programs, so I'm going to skip that one. With regard to academic achievement, will socioeconomic data be part of the criteria? I'm really happy that you answered, or excuse me, that you asked this question. Hassan, do you want to start to
Yes,
answer?
yes, that would be under meeting 4 under educational student support services. Part of that would be looking at the data, based on the California school dashboard, but looking at different student groups, looking at all students, looking at English learners, foster youth, homeless, economically disadvantaged, students with disability, and so forth. So that would be a criteria.
Okay. All right. And I'm not going to add anything there. The rest of these questions are starting to become really, really broad and varied. So I'm gonna finish up on this question, or excuse me, on this slide, number 3, the shaping our schools process. As I mentioned before, whether a decision is made to close any school, but let's assume that at least one school is closed. With that process, if one school were closed and a decision is made in November or December by the board, then we move into the shaping the school process going forward. And that process, even though we don't know what's going to happen, we've actually started that process now. I've been reaching out, as I mentioned, to superintendents that have gone through the school closure process. We're working with School Services of California through this process, and we're very fortunate to have someone who is expert in this. And so what we're finding in terms of those best practices, those things that help with the transition, the types of meetings that are held, the types of communications that are held. Again, should we need to close a school, we're actually starting to develop what that plan looks like now. And largely, Marianne will get into some of the details, but largely what it means is convening people. It means getting them together, making sure that we're understanding their needs, potential surveys and those kinds of things. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Marianne.
Thank you. So you are absolutely correct. So I too have been reaching out to those across the state and even beyond the state who have had to go through this similar process to really find out how to support the who. how to support our staff, how to support our students, how to support our families. This is not going to be an easy process. And we want to make sure that we, one, communicate clearly, that we're as transparent as we can be throughout this process. So if you have ideas on how we can get this information to our families in another way, that would be lovely. Just send those on over to me. But really, if it is determined that a school does need to close, and the majority of those students then will be going to a different school, very likely they'll identify what school that would be, unless the student doesn't transfer or school of choice. We really want to get those two populations together. We want to get them talking. We want to get them talking about their traditions, what's really important to them, what struggles or challenges have they had in their own school site with their own school culture. I mean, culture is a big thing. It's the vibe of the school, right? We are going to combine two different vibes, and we really want to make sure that we do it in a way that the students who are coming in and the students that are there and the staff that are there and the families that are there and coming in have that opportunity to talk to one another, determine their vision, their mission, their values. That would be through various meetings. It might be we put a big committee together of people from both schools, and then through that we plan activities. Maybe we do a meeting to really tell everybody how this is going to happen, but then we do a lot of fun social things. We have a movie night over summer and bring everyone together, maybe with some food trucks to really get everyone introduced. Maybe we do some team building activities with the students and asking if they have an ASB or their school leaders, their school student leaders, to lead some fun activities so kids can meet kids. Many times they already know each other from Little League or dance or other things. So those connections might already be made, but we want to make sure that we help foster that. And when it comes to staff, we want to be able to help foster what the school is going to look like and how you're going to move forward. There are so many different programs and ways that you connect with your families, and we want to make sure that we honor that and honor that for both that might be coming together as one. So we'll hopefully have a lot of opportunities to engage the full community before the new school year would start and have those conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just want to emphasize the role of our PTAs, PTOs, PFOs. They will also be a part of that, and they'll be a critical part of that. And that's something that Marianne and I have heard from our partners who have gone through this process, so that they will also be in there.
So we're now at the Q&A session, which we've been doing. So I'm going to stop sharing here. This is our last slide so that I can't see the Q&A while I share. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then do we have more questions to take?
We do. Okay, and I'm going to reorient this question. Okay, so the first question is there a specific dollar amount that the district is trying to save, or a number of schools they're trying to close? So the answer right now is no. And I'll approach this in two ways. The first one is I've already gone over the approximate savings per type of school. So as you can imagine, the number of schools could come with more savings, but even smaller schools come with less savings. So it's really too early to tell how much could be saved until we look at the criteria. We need to see which schools are most eligible to meet the criteria. In terms of is the district trying to save a certain amount of money? I'm just going to go back to the realities that we're facing, what it looks like to lose 300 students per year. So we've been losing 300 students per year. And by losing, again, people have joined this call at different times. I want to be really clear when we use that term. We are losing the bigger classes that have gone through, so our larger graduating classes. But in terms of enrolling new students, there are just fewer new students to enroll. So we have fewer children being born. Even the families that have moved into the area are having fewer children. And so that's our reality. So if you're looking at a number, there isn't a specific number, but just to get a sense of, on an annual basis, if we are losing or not enrolling 300 more students a year, that in itself is around $3.6 million. So that's just a financial reality. So I hope I answered that question. The next question is a really broad philosophical question. How do we provide a fulfilling education for students who learn at a slower pace with a larger classroom setting? I'm not going to get too much into this because it's not the point of our webinar. That's a really important question. We talked about honoring special education. We meet students' needs based on their IEP. If they don't have an IEP, there are other documents and other processes that ensure that we're meeting the needs of students with special needs. And then the larger classroom setting portion, we've talked about that already, which is that the sizes of our classrooms are dictated by our contract. We'll honor that contract as we go through this process as well.
One thing that I think on that is that's helpful for people to understand, and one of the things the demographer was saying at our last board meeting that we do have on our Facebook and Instagram is it's not about trying to necessarily put more students in a classroom. It's the fact that we're only utilizing 40% of the entire campus. So it's less about trying to put more into a classroom and more about actually utilizing the full campus itself. So I don't think necessarily everyone always sees that. I know I've arrived, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and I have actually seen less and fewer actual classrooms being used for classes. So I think that difference and might help some folks as they're trying to kind of grasp why we're doing this. It's less about fitting more into a classroom and more about utilizing a full campus completely, because so many of our campuses are completely underutilized and have empty classrooms, or they're using them for some other fun activity, but in all reality could be used for a classroom.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great addition. The next question, I feel like we've answered, but I want to pose it, and then Hassan, please feel free if there's anything else that we can add. It's are there any features of a school that are looked at more when the schools are being looked at for school closure? My take on that is there isn't one particular factor that is looked at more, but if I were a member of the committee, there may be some elements that they have the same weight, but there's some elements that will require more analysis because there is so much dense material to get through in terms of the scoring. So that's something that we've learned through this process. Hassan, is there something you would like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you stated it. I mean, each school would be looked at, and like you would take a look at if there's specific unique facilities at one site that can't be easily replicated. There'd also be looking at environmental factors. Is there any earthquake fault lines running through a school, or any easements running through a school? And so there's no like one is better than the other. Every site has to be looked at. Is there an inclusive playgrounds at certain sites? Is there hardwood floors at certain sites? So you're looking at each facility and assessing it.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to answer in two different ways. It's asking about where's the biggest impact of school closures. In terms of the fiscal impact, closing a high school nets the most savings from a personnel perspective, but then also from a facilities and facilities care perspective and upkeep perspective. But I actually want to answer that a different way. The biggest impact of closing a school is on the impact to families. Some of us have been fortunate to work in other districts and have gone through this process. It is an emotional process. There's no way around it. It affects families. Kids generally are pretty resilient. You know, once we work around them, we tell them what's going on. They meet their new teacher. They meet their new classmates. They play on the playgrounds. You know, for the most part, kids they come along pretty nicely. We as adults struggle with kind of like the loss of what we had. We have schools that have long traditions, rich histories, unique things that have made that school special. So that's actually, in my perspective, beyond the fiscal. It's just living with the idea of shifting, especially when you have some family members, when you could go back multiple generations to say, we all went through, you know, this elementary, we all went through that middle school. There's a lot of loss that comes with it. So thank you for asking that question.
Dr. Kessler, just so you're aware,
Yeah.
we have 3 minutes left in the time here, but I know that all three of us are willing to stay on a bit longer, but I just wanted you to know the next couple of questions might be the last that some of our attendees can stay on for. We are recording and we will go a bit beyond this, but I just wanted to let you know.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm going to scroll through then and just real quickly address the question is, are there already schools that are being decided to be closed? The answer is no. The thing that has been decided is that Buena and Ventura will not be closed. Okay. Public comments, we'll skip that.
The beginning. It'll be the beginning.
Yeah, public comment will be at the beginning. Okay. They can move it, but that's to be determined later. When will the schools be announced to close? That could happen between November, December of 2026.
A lot of people are asking about, about reaching out. Check your next newsletter on March 12th. I will include all of the board member emails and other ways for you to stay engaged in this topic. So check that out for ways to have your voice be heard.
One of the questions talks about the condition of schools. Dr. Mirza went over that. We went over a lot of information very quickly. The amount of resources that have been put into schools, the amount of resources that haven't been put into schools, and the condition of those facilities, all of those things are factors as to whether a school is closed. In terms of it reopening, if it were to be reused, I want to use that term. It is unlikely that if a school were to be closed and not immediately used for student purposes, it's unlikely that it's going to reopen for school purposes. However, it could be reused in other ways. There's a question about who votes the final decision. That is a board decision. The board is the only entity that can vote on this. They are not obligated to close a school. They're not obligated to close any number of schools. They're also not obligated to act in any particular timeline, but it is ultimately the board that decides. Thank you for the questions and suggestions. We're skipping those, just trying to find a couple more.
There's one that says the data we'll be using, analyzing to make these recommendations public. Yeah, so all of the information that this committee would be looking at would be attached to the agendas and posted.
So all you have to do is go to the school closures website. Again, will be in that newsletter. That link will be there, and all of those. There's a link to all of the agendas, and everything will be there for you to review.
Yeah.
Okay, and since it's 6 o'clock, there was one question that was asked, and I'm glad you did. I'm going to answer it as quickly as I can. It had to do with administrative buildings. And that is it's a very separate but related question. The board has been dedicated over the last few years to effectively using our surplus properties. Our district office is one of several surplus properties, and that was out in a process called a request for proposal process that actually closes. I think it closed. Was it today, Hassan? So yes, we are absolutely looking at all of our surplus properties, plus this administrative building as well, to determine whether or not there is some other effective way for that. I'll also take this opportunity to share that our board has been equally over this number of years looking at how we can provide educator workforce housing as a part of that process. So that's, again, those are two things that were not the point of today, but thank you for posing those questions. And given that it's 6:01 and we want to honor your time, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to join us. Your questions were outstanding. Thank you for the grace that you will be giving this committee as they go through this process. I want to thank the committee members for stepping up and meeting the needs of the community. It is a bold position to put yourself in, and we need people like you. Want to also thank our staff for enduring just the unknowns over the next few months. And please just continue to be in open conversation with us and with the board as we go forward. So thank you very much for attending, Maria, and anything to share before we finish?
No, again, just check your next newsletter, March 12th, and I'll make sure I have additional information for you. Just keep checking those newsletters. They're out once or twice a month.
Okay, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you all.